Those traveling on I-80 through eastern Wyoming may be surprised to see a huge bust of Abraham Lincoln. What's up with that? Lincoln died before Wyoming even became a U.S. territory and long before it became a state. He never set foot in today's boundaries of the state, so why the monument to the honored American president? The answer lies in the annals of history, long before I-80 was even conceived. To understand the reason for the Lincoln bust, you need to go back to 1912, when an entrepreneur from Indiana named Carl G. Fisher came up with the harebrained idea to create a highway that ran from coast to coast. No, this wasn't the famed Route 66. That came about long after Fisher's idea, in late 1926, and owes its popularity to advertising done through song and a TV show. Despite John Steinbeck calling it the Mother Road in his book The Grapes of Wrath, Route 66 is a latecomer, and it didn't extend from coast to coast, as Fisher envisioned for his highway. In conjunction with Henry B. Joy, the president of the Packard Motor Car Company, Fisher created the Lincoln Highway in 1912. Originally a rough collection of rutted dirt roads, especially in the western United States, the Lincoln Highway extended all the way from Times Square in New York City to Lincoln Park in San Francisco. Over its 3,389 miles, it wound through 13 states. One of those states was Wyoming, where there was definitely little but dirt roads and trails in 1912. It's an interesting fact that the Lincoln Highway was the country's first national memorial to Abraham Lincoln. The famed Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. wasn't dedicated for another decade until 1922. By then, thousands of people were traveling the Lincoln Highway, which also became known as the Main Street across America. When the U.S. government started numbering highways in the late 1920s, much of the original Lincoln Highway was numbered as U.S. Route 30. This is, in fact, where the Wyoming statue of Abraham Lincoln comes into the picture. The 13.5-foot bronze bust was created in 1959 to celebrate the sesquicentennial of Lincoln's birth in 1809 and placed atop a 35-foot granite base at the point where US 30 crossed Sherman Summit, about 10 miles east of Laramie, Wyoming. With an elevation of 8,835 feet, this was the highest point on the original Lincoln Highway in its entire transcontinental span. The bust was created by Robert Russin, an art professor at the University of Wyoming, whose ashes are interred in the hollow base of the monument. When I-80 was constructed, it followed much of the original route of the Lincoln Highway, particularly through Wyoming. The interstate route, when it crossed Sherman Summit, was about a half mile from the Lincoln statue and about 200 feet lower in elevation. In 1969, the bust of Lincoln was moved to its present location to mark the highest elevation on I-80. It is located in a rest area where travelers can easily stop and read about the history of the monument and the significance of the point that it marks. There are also several other historical markers at the rest area, such as this one, which marks the highest point on the Purple Heart Trail. Another marker indicates the first canyon in the west through which a telephone line was run in 1882. There's also a monument to Henry Joy, who served as the first president of the Lincoln Highway Association and was a staunch proponent of the highway. While camping near Wamsutter, Wyoming in 1916, Joy expressed a desire to be buried at the site of the original monument. His family did not act on his wishes, but instead built the monument there in 1938 after Joy's death. The monument was moved to its present location in 2001. Travelers to this spot along I-80 can also, if they are a tiny bit adventurous, visit the original high point location of US 30, which clearly overlooks the current rest area and memorial to Lincoln. Walking across the uneven terrain at this high point one can overlook I-80 toward the east. When you continue to look around, it is easy to see where the original road winds up and down the face of the hill. One can easily imagine the rugged driving conditions that early travelers faced in this remote region of the country. This is why Lincoln is in Wyoming, to mark the highest point of the original Lincoln Highway and, now, the highest point on I-80. Despite the modern presence of I-80, the Lincoln Highway still has a huge presence in Wyoming, with many towns preserving bits and pieces of the route. My town, in Lyman, Wyoming, lies on the old Lincoln Highway in the western corner of the state, with the route going right past my front door. For those interested in the impact of the Lincoln Highway in Wyoming, I'll include a link in the notes down below to a fascinating documentary about the first 100 years of the Lincoln Highway through Wyoming, along with a link or two to other helpful resources. So, if you find yourself crossing the country on I-80 and you happen to see a large bust of Abraham Lincoln just off the road between Cheyenne and Laramie, be sure to stop and take a picture or two. You'll be walking over ground that has a significant meaning in the development of automobile travel in the United States. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me today. Thanks.